Zoning Appeals meeting of October 28th, 2021 is now in session. The first order of business is to approve the minutes from June 24th, 2021 meeting. I just want to know if the 4 people are here to vote. I assume they are, okay. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from June 24th?
So moved.
Second?
Second. I don't care. So many seats, you know.
Any modifications or discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions, so it's unanimous.
I'll abstain, I wasn't here.
Abstain, because
Right.
you weren't there.
Right.
Okay.
The 4 people that voted and are listed in the program
They're
there
there.
are there. Then to the same 4 people, adoption of the June 24th, 2021 resolutions. Is there a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
Any modifications or discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, abstentions?
Abstain.
Next is adoption of the October 7th, 2021 minutes.
You may not have 4.
Our whole board here.
7. Everybody's here.
Yeah, she wasn't here.
Then, so we do have 4.
4 of us here.
We have enough people to vote, sure.
Yeah.
So, adoption of the October 7th minutes, is there a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
Any modifications or discussion? Lisa, is this the one where I asked you to spell my first name
Yeah,
correctly?
I corrected it.
Yeah, okay, fine. Anything else, Mike?
Do we have to vote on this draft scope of?
No. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? Okay. The board will now conduct the public hearings on today's agenda. The way we work it here is that first the applicant or the applicant's representative will state the reasons for the requested variance and present any material or documentation which is to be considered regarding the proposals. Next, persons wishing to speak in favor of the proposal will be given the opportunity to address the board. Then persons who wish to speak in opposition will be allowed to address the board. Finally, the applicant or a representative will be given the option to make any closing arguments or comments to the board. Following the public hearings this afternoon, the board may make a decision on each application heard. The board may also decide to hold its decision until the next public hearing. If the hearing is closed, no additional information will be allowed into the record except for information that the board may request. That information will be available for public review at the zoning office in City Hall Commons. Staff will now introduce the first application.
Okay, the first application is V-17-08M1. It's a use variance modification for uses permitted. The address is 438 and 440 Columbus Avenue. The application is to expand a museum with 5 guest rooms and 1 dwelling unit. The owner applicant is the Greater Syracuse Property Development Corporation, and the zoning district is residential class B1.
The applicant here? I'm going to ask anybody who steps up to the podium to please say their name and their address before they start. Thank you.
Caitlin Wright, 369 Forest Hill Drive. I'm the Executive Director of the Greater Syracuse Land Bank. We're here with a variance modification application for the Gustav Stickley House at 438 Columbus. And we've got a couple of things going on. In 2017, this board approved a variance to allow the ground floor to be used as a museum, and the basement, second and third floor would include 4 guest rooms and 2 apartments. And so one of the things we're asking for today is a modification to change that from 4 guest rooms and 2 apartments to 5 guest rooms and 1 apartment, both for financial reasons and operational reasons, and I'll go through the standards of proof in just a minute. We're also in the process of merging 438 with 440, so there's an accompanying re-subdivision application in front of the Planning Commission right now. So we would be expanding this non-conforming use. There's also a slight change in the floor plan that I'm going to walk you through. Let me check my notes here and see if I'm forgetting anything else. The initial variance, the deadline for completion of that work has passed. The project is taking a little longer than anticipated for fundraising reasons, so we're asking for the completion deadline to be extended to March 16th, 2023. So I am going to distribute a few things here. I have copies of the variance that was approved in 2017, if anybody would like to see that. But what I think is most useful here are two sets of floor plans. The first is what was approved in 2017, and on the back side, you can see the most significant difference here now is that we're putting an addition on the building that is larger than what was initially approved. So I'm just going to pass these out and come right back.
Do we already have these in our packet, or is this?
Yes. No, you have. No. Did you submitted that though, Caitlin, right? Caitlin, is this a submittal?
They have the floor plans that were approved in 2017, obviously, and we submitted a complete set of floor plans with our application. But this is more of a compare and contrast graphic that are helpful.
Oh,
I have a hard time telling the difference between the two sets, and so I've made some red notations here that I think.
it's clarification. You do have the proposed floor plan, but separate from.
Yeah, sorry. I'm a visual learner, so I need the red lines to show me. So the major difference in the floor plan that you can see here, one side shows what was in our submission today, the 2021 floor plans, and the other side shows 2017. So you can see the rear wall of the building as it's currently configured is drawn there in red for you. And what you approved in 2017 was just the addition of this small elevator that would be accessed off of the rear entry hall. The rear wall includes the historic Inglenook entry hall and kitchen, and those floor plans are not changing. If you flip it over, you can see that red line is in the same location, showing that the Inglenook rear entry hall and kitchen are still in the same configuration that they are currently, but the addition has gotten much larger. We need to do that to comply with building code, to provide enough space for the lula or elevator to have the mechanicals housed, and to provide ADA accessible bathrooms without altering the historically designated interior of the building. So I can go through the standards of proof. Again, this board approved the variance in 2017, and the standards of proof at that time met your standards. Now, what we're asking for is the change from 4 guest rooms and 2 apartments to now instead 5 guest rooms and 1 apartment. And we've included in our application 2 financial scenarios. This is an unusual project because we're not looking for a return on investment the way most private developers would. The renovations are completely funded with grants and donations, and this project will not generate any return on investment. But what we're looking to do is to make it break even once it's in operation so that it's financially sustainable going forward. And in your packets, you'll see that the existing scenario that's already been approved would fall short by about $30,000 every year, and the new scenario would break even. So that's the financial justification. As far as unique circumstances, it's unique that this is a locally designated landmark, and not only the exterior but also the interior is designated, and so we really don't want to make any changes to the ground floor interior because that's the most significant space, and that's what's requiring us to be a little creative and put the addition on. Neighborhood character, most of these changes that we're talking about are interior and won't be visible from the street, and in fact the addition itself will really not be visible from the street due to elevation changes. I don't have Beth here to explain that, but she explained it earlier to the Landmark Preservation Board, and they were satisfied with her explanation of the sight lines. And then as far as the hardship not being self-created, we've agreed to be kind of an interim steward for this property and to hold title while during the fundraising phase and also during the interior renovations, largely because the land bank has lower carrying costs than any of the other organizations that we're partnered with. And we have a variety of partner organizations here with us today. Dave Michaels here from the University Neighborhood Preservation Association. They were the previous owners of the building. They completed phase 1, the exterior restoration. Dave Rudd is the president of the Gustav Stickley House Foundation that's been raising money for all of this restoration. So he's here today as well. And we have Greg Tripoli with us from the Onondaga Historical Association. As most of you already know, the end goal here is to complete the restoration and turn this over to OHA so that they can operate it as a museum with revenue-generating guest rooms on site so that it's financially sustainable. So the restrictions on the property, the landmark designation and those types of restrictions were already in place before we took title, and we're just meant to be temporary stewards of the property, so we don't believe that this is a self-imposed hardship.
I have a question. I guess it's a reminder, I just didn't remember. Guest rooms, is this going to be like a bed and breakfast, an Airbnb? You know, how's that going to operate? I see Greg.
I think Greg would be
shaking his
better,
head.
better
on
equipped to
down.
answer that.
Thank you. It'll operate sort of on a bed and breakfast model.
Tell us your name and address.
My
please.
name is Greg Tripoli. I'm with the Onondaga Historical Association at 321 Montgomery Street in Syracuse. So that's, I mean,
So tell us the answer again, because I wasn't.
sorry?
It's going to operate as a,
It'll operate on a bed and breakfast model, yes.
and the OHA is going to hire a manager to do that, because you don't do.
Yeah, we'll be hiring a director of the museum who's also kind of operates as a concierge for the guest house component, but there'll also be a live-in caretaker so that we make sure that the house is, as much as possible, occupied 24/7, and who are there to take care of guests and to take care of the property.
So every day that you have guests, the kitchen will be busy making a breakfast for those who are staying?
Ostensibly, yes, very busy. Good breakfast. And we imagine also that there will be some also day help that may be required from time to time as well.
The guests, what access will they have to the rest of the house?
They will have full access to the rest of the house. The house will be operated as a museum during the regular operating hours of the day. And so there will be tours and events and educational programs and things. There also may be evening events that guests will be allowed, guests of the house that will be allowed to attend. But yes, for the most part in the evening, the house will not be open to the public. And if there's not an event, then the guests in the house have access to the whole house.
Can you tell us how parking will work? I see it's like parallel parking in the driveway next door.
Yeah, I'm kind of waiting to see the final layout with on the site plan, but I assume that we can do a number of tandem cars on the far left side of the drive. That will be easy to just parallel park, pull out, so that we leave the drive free. But I'm assuming, I mean, I hate to say, I just don't know how many cars we could park along there, but I kind of, measured it up with mine, and I think we could park 5 cars or so on tandem on the side of
And
that.
there's available parking on the street too, I think.
There's available parking on the street, yes, of course.
Is there an option at the end to turn around so you don't have to back all the way out again?
I think that there probably will be, but I don't know yet. I have to look at the a site plan with the addition onto the back of the house and how far we have until what we assume will be a retaining wall because it's at the bottom of a hill, so we want to get a little bit of space and also to stabilize that hillside behind the house. So I'm assuming that we'll put a very short retaining wall there that will likely give us a little bit more flat space in that area, so it may be possible to turn around and head out as well as head in.
The site plan's on page 40.
Yeah, and I apologize. I'm glad that you asked that question because I was supposed to speak to this and I completely forgot. There is a site plan in your packet prepared by Crawford and Stearns. EDR is working on a more detailed site plan for us right now. We don't expect this concept to change much. There's just simply not physically enough space to arrange the parking any other way. There's not enough room to make it diagonal. I think the tandem parking like this is going to be our only option. And if you're looking at parking behind the setback line, I think we have enough room for 4, maybe 5 spaces. And I just don't think there is going to be physically enough room to turn a car around, but we're just not 100% sure at this point in time. They're doing a drainage study right now and looking at the slopes. Like Greg said, the north and western edges of the property are very steeply sloped, so that we're hopeful we might be able to fit 5, but it might just be 4. So on that topic, knowing that the site plan is going to evolve a little bit, but that it's not really going to change much from this concept, I'm not sure if the board today would want to vote to approve this contingent on certain things, or how we'd want to handle that.
Yeah, if the board wants to see any conditions set forth, such as additional screening, landscaping, the front yard setback should be respected, you can do that conditionally, and then we can accept a site plan that is more detailed.
Okay.
Or we can just, they can just approve this, and then you can come back when you're ready for a modification,
Okay.
which possibly is probably a new business item.
Okay.
Is there a parking requirement?
Well, because it's a use variance, it's up to you.
Okay. So, but typically it would be 1 per room?
One per boarder or well, it really depends, because bed and breakfast has a different requirement. Boarding and rooming house has a different requirement. Dwelling units have a different requirement, and a museum or gallery have a different requirement. So I think looking at the site and looking at what is available physically, and based upon the needs of the program, you could make an informed decision about the number of parking spaces. If you need more information, you can ask the applicant. I do have a question. How would the re-subdivision affect that, if at all?
How would it affect what?
Because there'll be more room now to the
For the
east.
transient guests.
Right. We're going to have to put our heads together after this meeting, I guess, that we might have to come back and modify. Well, I mean, this is the map that we've submitted with the re-subdivision application. So
Yeah.
I suppose if the re-sub is approved Monday night with this map, we'd have to come back and get something
Yeah.
revised.
The strip of land, though, is where you have those trees on the left-hand side, correct?
Yes,
So
that's
that serves
correct.
as a good buffer. So you might not
Right.
want to encroach further, but I was just, for the education of this board, to know
Right.
that there's other land that you want to include, but not physically for parking.
Right, I'm not sure if it would be, economically feasible to dig into that hillside because it
Right.
is so steeply sloped, so,
And it's very narrow. So.
right.
Heather, are you saying that, I mean, you mentioned boarding house and B&B and all that, so this doesn't have an official designation?
No, because none of these uses aren't allowed there, which is why you're considering the modification to the use variance.
So,
Can you say that one more time, Heather?
These uses are not allowed in residential B1. Right, except for the dwelling unit.
so we will be the designants, that's not the right word, of whether this is a B, we don't have to declare that, we just have to state.
Yeah, I mean, technically, you already waived parking because this is just a modification.
Got it, okay.
All these uses have already been approved.
Has the driveway width been approved at the curb?
Yep, so if you look at the previous resolution, it should be in here. It is on page. Okay.
Existing
On
driveway 20 feet
page-
wide.
Uh-huh. 16? Okay.
Yeah, 16. There, that's the previously approved for 4 vehicles. That was in 2017. That was the site plan.
And that showed the driveway, as it's currently configured today, approximately 20 feet wide and didn't propose any narrowing.
Right.
Sorry, I missed that. So what is it? Was it ever approved?
Right here, page 16.
16, so that drawing was approved?
Yep.
And that's, what, 20-some feet?
Caitlin said 20.
Yeah, the resolution from 2017 says that we submitted a site plan with an existing driveway measuring approximately 20 feet wide and parking for 4 vehicles.
But you may not have 4 vehicles, that's right? You might just have 3.
I think we can fit at least 4 here, possibly 5. So the parking has really not changed since 2017.
It really hasn't. I mean, you have lines in your new site plan, perpendicular lines, which the end, you just don't have cars drawn in.
Right.
So it's essentially looks almost exactly the same. In fact, it is, with the exception of the addition.
Right.
I guess. Need to say anything about the number of vehicles, or can we just waive the parking requirement, period?
You don't need to do that. You're looking at the expansion in the rear, the physical expansion of it, and the number of rooms, guest rooms, and the dwelling unit. So overall, if you conclude, is it adequate to have 4 spots for this land, these land uses together?
And if that's the conclusion that you guys made for a total of 6 units in 2017, we still have a total of 6 units. It's just a different makeup of units.
Well, if the addition at the rear is the main thing, I would be curious to see a plan for the retaining wall, because I suspect it's going to be more than a small wall.
To be determined.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say definitely less than 3 feet.
Less than 3 feet.
I mean, that would be my guess. I don't,
Do any of our partners here know better than us?
yeah.
How big is the retaining wall?
How tall the retaining wall? And I said no taller than 3 feet, for sure.
The difference in elevation is probably about.
Would you like to come and talk to the board? Please state your name and address.
Sure. Hi, I'm Beth Carford. I'm with Carford and Stearns Architects. The elevational difference between the driveway of the Stickley house and the adjacent driveway, which angles up from the street, varies between 0 and probably 60 inches. EDR is currently starting to develop design documents for the site plan.
I think it's a different retaining wall. You're talking about the retaining wall behind the house.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right, that's it, yeah. We
Oh.
don't expect that to be.
Not on the western edge,
Oh,
on the
not
northern edge.
on the north, western
Now
edge.
I'm all confused about direction. There.
Actually, that would be very low. That would just be behind the addition and could possibly be 24 or 30 inches.
How much space do you expect between the building wall and the retaining wall?
Being designed at this point, but probably less than 3 feet. It's not going to be up the hill at all. It'll be right behind the addition.
Okay.
But not enough to turn a car in.
To what?
To turn around?
Oh, no.
No, not enough to get a car in.
You can only stay at the Stickley house if you drive a motorcycle.
Or an electric bicycle.
4 feet. Okay, other questions from the board? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody here who wishes to speak in favor of the application?
My name is David Michael. I live at 94 Xavier Circle, and I'm representing the board of the University Neighborhood Preservation Association. I think maybe rather than read my statement, I'm going to make a couple comments on the design process. But as some of you know, AMPA is a neighbor organization whose mission is encourage greater home ownership in the area east of the university and to revitalize the neighborhood. We fully support the request for a use variance to assure the completion of the restoration of the Gustav Stickley House. As Caitlin has already said, we took title in 2016, and with assistance of foundation and state grants, completed the restoration of the exterior. Let me just take a moment. I'm also on the board of the Gustav Stickley House Foundation, and since the variance was approved, we've gone through an extensive design process with the land bank, the foundation, and OHA. Crawford and Stern is our architect, and they have an engineering firm, and the plan you see before you is the result of several dialogue and it's a consensus that this is the best plan for the site. Similarly, the foundational land bank has employed EDR, and they're undertaking a site plan. I think certain parameters, I think as Caitlin and Greg said, there's going to be 4 to 5 parking spaces. It's not going to be probably a retaining wall. There's not going to be substantial changes in the site, but they'll be talking about materials and things like that. They recently got an updated survey, and based on that, they're going to be providing some alternatives for our design committee, site design committee to look at. And again, we'll come up with a consensus what the best site design is, such as we did with the design of the building itself. If anyone has any questions for Ampa, I'm going to turn it over to the president of the Gustav Stickley House Foundation.
Thank you, Dave.
Hi, my name is Dave Rudd. I live at 6827 Dutch Hill Road, Fayetteville, New York. I have a business here in Syracuse, and I'm president of the Gustav Stickley House Foundation. It's a project I've been involved in a couple of decades now. But I'm also the board president of the foundation, and we, despite the significant delays that we had with COVID and all the problems that brought to us, we've raised over $350,000 now. We have secured the Save America's Treasures grant. That's a matching grant, and we've got a commitment for $250,000 towards that right now. And we've also applied for the Environmental Protection Grant for $500,000, and we'll learn about that in December. So we're getting, it's a slow process. It's a tough project to raise money for, especially when you have a pandemic happening, but we seem to be catching people's ears, and not just in the city, but all over the country. We're getting, we had a gentleman from Massachusetts that gave us about a $30,000 collection of furniture, as well as $50,000 cash. So it's really reaching out. People are very excited about this. I'm a dealer in Gustav Stickley furniture, and I have clients all over the country, and everybody's talking about it. And I get questions daily about it. And I've given 300 tours through the house, people coming into town. Is there any questions about the foundation? No?
No, sounds like it's going well.
A little slower than I was hoping, but yeah, it's going well. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak? Wait,
I have a question.
we have a question.
Yeah. Now, I take it the museum will be accessible, but will the B&B be accessible?
Will it be furnished in antiques?
No.
Accessible, ADA.
Oh, accessible?
It's ADA.
Oh, yes, fully ADA accessible. The Lula will go from the first to the third floor. We'll have ADA bathrooms in several of the guest rooms. The kitchen will be ADA accessible, and there's an ADA accessible restroom on the first floor for any visitors. Yeah, and there'll be a nice walkway. The walkway will go grade level into the vestibule that will house the elevator, and you could take it up to the first floor and then continue up to the third floor.
So I guess when a guest comes or a visitor to the museum, they're going to enter through the rear?
Yes, that's kind of the plan right now. There'll be kind of a a welcome hallway there. It might be used as some exhibition space. It could have the major donors' names on it, the major sponsors' names listed somewhere there. And it'll be a very inviting, kind of period-looking space without it trying to emulate what Gustav Stickley did.
Thank you.
Sure, thank
Anyone
you.
else wish to speak in favor of the application? Hearing none, is there anybody here who wishes to speak against the application? Okay, thank you. We will move on to our next application.
Okay, our next application is V-21-17. It's an area variance to waive required side yard treatment at 800 to 808 East Fayette Street. The application request is to construct a parking lot. The owner is Wellington Place LLC. The applicant is Gilbane Development Company. The zoning district is local business Class A.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Brian Bouchard. I'm with CHA Consulting, project engineer working on behalf of the owner and the applicant. Also with me is Michael Quigley from the Rothschild Company, representing the owner under the entity Wellington Place LLC. And this is a request to allow a reduced side yard buffer between, which I'll explain in a second, the remaining parking lot and what is being developed as a new apartment project. So just to give you a little context, this is the existing site survey. So it currently exists as a surface parking lot bounded by East Fayette to the north, Foreman to the west, and Wellington Place to the south. And the owner of the property is selling the westerly half of the existing parking lot for the development of a residential apartment project. So the owner will retain the remaining land that's shown in red for continued use as a surface parking lot of 49 spaces. And the board will recall that in June, at the June meeting of this year, we discussed the adjacent apartment project and the board granted the variances to move that project forward. And then it was subsequently given to the Planning Commission where they approved the project as well as the re-subdivision to create the new property line that's going to sell a portion to the apartment project and for the owner to retain the land for continued use as a parking lot. Since that time that the approvals were granted, the developer has submitted permits for construction for the apartment project, and CHA has submitted permits on behalf of the owner for the new curb cuts and the restriping of this parking lot to be used by the existing owner. So that brings us to today, which this is the layout for that residual land that's going to be used as parking. So basically during the permit review, it's been identified that the remaining parking lot requires a side yard buffer to the new apartment use that adjoins it. Zoning code requires 10 feet between the parking lot and the property line. And this portion of the code in terms of side yard treatment actually has two aspects. One is that a screening device be provided, which we will be providing a compliant 6-foot solid vinyl fence to separate that parking area from the adjacent residential use. And the other is the 10 feet of green space. So our request is to allow 3 feet of green space while still providing that solid screening device with the fence. And the justification is really that this project was obviously a collaborative effort, right, between the adjacent developer who's purchasing the land from the owner and then the ownership themselves who have specifically created the new parking inclusive of this 3-foot setback and the screening device. And really when you look at the land that's remaining, it's truly the width and where the new property line's been created, which is really a best fit for both projects. And obviously providing the full 10 feet of that green space would cause a significant reduction in the available parking left for the existing owner as part of the combined project. So I will mention that this is the only variance that's needed for the parking lot to be reconfigured, and that the new parking area otherwise complies with all the other aspects of the planting and screening requirements. There's other things such as the street line treatment, which is providing more green space along the right-of-ways, things like the The curb cuts and fire access requirements have been talked about, and we're actually adding some drainage improvements to the new parking lot as well to benefit the city infrastructure. Both projects, including the reconfigured parking lot and the apartment, are also providing new sidewalks along all the road frontages adjacent to the project, some of which are actually not existing now. So we believe that the variance will allow the owner really the best use of the property, given where the property line's been created, in collaboration, obviously, with both projects, including the apartments and this restriping plan. And that overall, these two projects are really going to create an improvement from what's currently obviously an existing large surface parking with minimal landscape and street treatment areas. So with respect to the standards of proof with the area variance, the first one being whether or not it'll create an undesirable change in the character or detriment to nearby properties. Again, the answer would be no, because the adjacent projects have been a collaborative effort, right, between the developer who's purchasing land from this owner and the owner who's reconfiguring his parking lot. And obviously that the screening device will still be provided to control things like the headlight glare and still provide that hard barrier separating the use of the apartments from the parking area. Also, the parking area, you can see there's no head-on parking to the side lot line, so there's a drive aisle that's abutting the property line, so there'll be a little less impact as far as cars, headlight glare and things of that nature. And also the what's not considered as part of this application, because it's on the other side of the property line, the apartment building is actually set back 8 feet off of that property line as well. So really there's 11 feet between this parking area and the apartment building itself to serve as an additional grass buffer. And that, in terms of the character of the neighborhood, we talked about enhancing it by removing this, the surface parking lot with a greater project to create available buildings adjacent to the East Genesee Street corridor. The second test is whether the benefit can be sought by some other method. The only other method would be providing the compliant setback, and it would negatively impact the amount of parking, right? We don't actually lose about 15 spaces from the 49 spaces that are supposed to remain for the owner's use based on the new configuration of the property line. And then the third test is whether it's substantial. We don't believe it's substantial because, again, the intent with collaborating these two projects is still provide that hard screening barrier with a solid vinyl fence to control headlight glare and other things, and that there's not only our 3 feet that we're asking you to reduce, but there's an additional 8 feet setback from the apartment that's next to it. And also, with the adjacent apartment, there is no pedestrian walkways, there's no seating areas, there's no amenity space that's directly adjacent to this property line. We've created it so that truly is a green space buffer on the other side of the property line as well. Whether it will have any adverse effect or impact on the physical environment, we don't believe there's any impacts on the physical environment. Again, we're providing other landscaping as far as the street line treatments, so we are bringing in more green space to this overall city block in terms of the environmental aspects there, and that this is, really a collaboration between the two projects with a side yard that's common between what the property owner has delineated for the two parcels. And then whether or not it's self-created. So with area variances, obviously it doesn't preclude the board to answer all these tests yes. It's a little bit different than a use variance. Things like an area variance that always come up, like signage and these setbacks, can in some ways be self-created, but the intent is really to provide the existing owner with enough area to retain the parking that was discussed as part of the negotiation with the development project as a whole, and that we believe the benefits and the minimal relief that we're requesting outweigh the potential for greater impacts, like reducing a significant loss of parking if the variance were not approved. So we ask for the board's support in allowing the variance to be approved and for the construction to hopefully begin very shortly here. So with that, if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Our job is always to look for the minimum change or variance. Why not 4 feet or 5 feet? What would that impact be?
Yeah, so I'm just going to come over here real quick, and hopefully I can talk loud enough so you can see the area that was left in question is really this narrow spot, right? And by moving it outward any further, we would not be able to provide the compliant access lane and these parking spaces. So essentially by moving it, we would be deleting this row of parking spaces because there wouldn't be enough dimension to physically fit it. So that's why we've landed on the 3 feet as the minimal that's needed to still provide the 49 spaces on the parcel.
What would it look like from a first floor window in the new apartment? What would they see looking out that window?
Yeah, so, you know, we do have that solid fence, you know, but it really, the perception from a first floor window or from any of the apartment windows, because it is a multi-story building, the perception between the 3 feet and the 10 feet is not going to be any different. When you look out the window, there's still going to be the parking field there, and the intent is to at least provide the separation for the first floor window with that solid screening device. So it's not like it would disappear if we moved it back, you know, a 5 or 6 or 7 feet to be compliant. It's still a parking lot next door. But again, we don't have cars parking perpendicular to the building, right? Where there would be constantly cars, headlight glares potentially in the windows. The drive aisle is what's north and south on that edge, so it mitigates it a little more as well, if that answers
Is the apartment planning any vegetation between the building and the fence?
So we have a grass area there. You know, as I said, it's 8 feet. We've been going through the iterations with the city arborist. Most of the comments have been particular to street trees around the apartment project. I'm not sure. There is a need to have utilities within that 8 feet. So currently, I think it's planned as grass, and that by planting something taller, you know, if that's kind of the direction we're headed with the question, it may not be as appropriate, because I think you'd start actually screening windows out if it was anything more than shrubbery or something like that, right? 8 feet is not a lot to have a broadly canopied tree on that side. So it's currently planned as grass, but again, separated from that fence line to give the green space that we need.
Is this something that could have been addressed when you're deciding how large a parcel to sell for the apartment?
Yeah, I think it's really a loose tooth, for a lack of better words. So when we did create the project and we submitted it to the zoning office, they were essentially submitted separately, where we had the apartment project being reviewed, and then we had a cursory review for what would be this parking lot to make sure that the property line was in an appropriate place. And I think what happened was that the property line was compared to being adjacent to what's essentially still a parking lot. So it wasn't until we got to actually having approved everything and submitted the permits that it was compared against the residential use that's now the apartment project. And it comes up that this specific requirement is specific to the adjacency of a parking lot to a residential use. You know, again, you could imagine this isn't associated parking, because we have our own parking on the apartment project, but you can imagine if it was, this requirement, you know, wouldn't exist anyway. So it's kind of a nuance in the code that came up as part of the combined review for the permits there.
Now, who will be parking on the lot?
So the parking is leased parking. Michael Quigley can answer better if I can, but it's currently leased to Upstate Medical University, and there's a shuttle bus that goes back and forth. So I believe all that is still going to be going forward as far as the lease agreements go and things like that.
Now, again, are these going to be student housing, or like grandma and grandpa can move in there?
So I mean, I've reiterated that this is, you know, all part of the same project, because that's what we created the property line for, is the apartment project, but that's a separate project as a whole, right? So that apartment project has an underground garage. It has its own surface parking, and all of the parking for the apartment project is contained on the adjacent apartment project. So this is essentially, right now, it's being used as surface parking for Upstate Medical University. And what is left will still be used for Upstate parking. It's just reduced because they're selling off a portion of that lot.
But I think my question is, like, the tent, maybe this, obviously not part of this case, but the apartment building, will that be student housing?
Yes, the answer is yes, yeah.
So then they will
Yep.
be transit all the time anyway?
Correct, yeah, I mean, they'll be in and out, right? We went through this a little bit, where it's obviously a prime location, it's on the connective corridor to kind of be positioned between downtown and the university, so hopefully it brings in an influx to some of the businesses that not only this owner owns along East Genesee Street, but kind of...
So you wouldn't expect someone to live there 30 years or anything like that?
No, absolutely not, right, unless they're one of those 30-year college, you know, type of people, so, but yeah.
Anything else from the board? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Anybody here wish to speak in favor of the application?
I'm Mike Quigley with the Rothschild Companies,
I'm here representing our company as well as Wellington Place LLC, which is the owner of the overall parcel. We're selling approximately 3/4 of the property for the project Brian is talking about. We're retaining about 1/4 of the property for our parking. The parking is going to be, some of it is going to be leased, but other spaces are going to be used to support our businesses that are located on East Genesee Street, adjacent to the property. The Rothschilds have had properties on Genesee Street since the 1920s. We need parking to support our buildings on East Genesee Street, as well as, you know, now that the lot is being reduced in size, there'll be some that is leased to Upstate. But without these 50 spaces, our properties are going to have a problem having adequate parking. We actually thought that, as Brian said, this project was developed in tandem with our need for parking. We actually thought, and the 50 spaces was a requirement on our part, we actually thought the prior approvals that the BZA and the Planning Commission did allowed us to have the 50 spaces, but we're happy to come back today and discuss it again. I guess the only other comment is that we'll have a real problem without having 50 spaces that can be used. If the setback is cut back, we're back to the drawing boards on trying to provide adequate parking, which won't happen. So we hope the board will support the application.
Did you give your
Thank you.
address, sir?
821 East Genesee Street, right across
Thank
the
you.
street. That's my office address.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak in favor of the application? Anybody want to speak against the application? Hearing none, we'll move to our new business. B1422 M1 411 Spencer Street. I'm trying to find. Okay, and what are they asking?
They're asking to add additional antennas to the tower.
Okay. Is there anybody representing?
No, so this
Come
is,
to
these are new business items which stand on their own. I'll introduce them. V1422M1, this is a use variance modification to 411 Spencer Street. This is a 120-foot communications tower. This is to co-locate a wireless provider. Clark Concrete is the owner, and SBA Properties LLC is the applicant, and this is in the Lakefront T4 zoning district. The use variance is appropriate because towers are not allowed in the zoning district, although it was established prior to being in the lakefront. So this is just modifying that variance in order to allow co-location.
And when's the last time we heard from them? In 2019?
Let me just.
Any comments?
This is, we had two, I think, at the last meeting.
Yeah, right, that's why.
My understanding is this doesn't require any additional construction, it's just locating another service on the same structure that is in place today.
Co-locate, they call it.
Yep.
Well,
2014 is the answer to your question.
I'd be glad to hear a motion on this.
I'll make a motion to approve it.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of approving modification, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Okay, the next one?
This is B1715, a time extension request for an area variance at 728 East Genesee Street. This proposal was previously approved to construct a 191-unit apartment building with retail space on the first floor. 728 EGSU LLC is the owner and applicant. Project lies within a business class A zoning district. This also came before the Planning Commission for a project site review, and there are multiple reviews and waivers involved in this. They would like the extension to be until August 30th of 2022.
Okay, and the planning commission said yes to that, correct? So I will.
Yes, with caution.
Is there a motion on this?
I'll make a motion to approve. I'll second.
Any discussion? I didn't ask for anybody's rationale, I'm sorry, but I think it speaks for itself. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? And we go to the discussion, and we also have the cases to do as well, but, so, tell us about the discussion.
The City of Syracuse Planning Commission is asking to act as lead agency for coordinated review under seeker. This is a project to construct 104 apartments in a new building at the residual property of 1030 to 1060 East Genesee Street. Scholar Syracuse LLC is the owner, and Opus Development Company LLC is the applicant. This is an Office Class B zoning district. The commission has a re-subdivision and a project site review on their upcoming not so distant agenda, and also the residual lot that will result. This is behind the Genesee Grand. The residual lot will require a variance modification to the Genesee Grand, now known as the Scholar. So you will be seeing this, but because it's a type 1 action, a coordinated review needs to take place under seeker, and the commission is asking to be lead agency on that and asking for the BZA's consent.
We don't really know much about the project, but I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? I just, why does the planning commission choose to ask for this? I mean, is there any rationale?
They have the most discretion, the amount of reviews that they are reviewing. You don't have to consent, you can say no.
Right, but I,
If there is a contest, if you will, between what the lead agency would be, that's actually, there's a dispute process that would be handled by the DEC. But one of the factors they do look at is who has the broadest range of authority, which in this case, it does seem by having more of a scope of review with the re-subdivision and the site plan review that could be interpreted to be the planning commission.
good enough for me.
And the particular project most likely won't have any variances. It's just the residual lot, as a result of the re-subdivision, is necessitating an amended and revised amended variance, modified variance for the existing hotel. So for the project itself, you probably won't have any authority or reviews.
There won't be any
It's
request.
just, it's a cause and effect type situation here, so.
There's seconded to approve this discussion, I mean, right? We're
Yes, you consent, you can make a
consent,
motion.
yeah, to consent
to-
for them being the lead agency. So, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Fine, that passes. Then we go to V1708M1, the use variance modification for 430 444 Avenue. Is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
The rationale?
We don't have to go through all of them because it's a modification. The addition at the rear is the main thing before us. That seems like a benefit to the project and will not be a detriment to the neighborhood. One of the things I see there is that there's now a stairway in addition to the elevator going all the way to the third floor. That's a benefit to anybody who's in that house in an emergency. So I think it's all a plus.
Who seconded?
Me.
Anything else?
I think it's a phenomenal project. I think it's going to enhance the community greatly. And I echo Michael's comments.
No, I just thought they have a good and exciting plan, you know, as well, and this helps it out a bit. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstentions? Okay. V2117, area variance to waive the side yard at 808 East Fayette Street and construct a parking lot, right? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
There is a second.
I'll second.
Okay,
I'll go through the area variance test. Will there be a change to the neighborhood character? I don't believe so because it currently exists as a parking lot. As a matter of fact, this is a reduction in size and it'll probably be jazzed up a little bit. So, it'll be improvement. Are there alternate solutions available so the variance is not needed? Doesn't seem to be. I mean, I get the argument about the need to deal with the emergency vehicles in and out. And can I agree to support the importance of needing those spaces to support the businesses on East Genesee Street that have been there a long, long time? I think that's important. What is the magnitude of the variance being requested? I think it's minimal. Talking about 7 feet, and you know, in addition to that, there's space created between the parking lot and the building, the apartment building, because the apartment building is not constructed up to the lot line, so it creates 11 feet, I think the number was, between the improvements. Will there be an adverse effect on the surrounding neighborhood if this variance is approved? No, I do not believe so. Again, it exists as parking today, as it stands. Is this a self-created difficulty? I guess so, but we don't need all 5 tests in order to prove the variance.
all those in favor of approving the variance say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes. I don't see anything about the next meeting. Is there a next meeting?
There's no authorization for the next meeting, yeah, no public
Okay,
hearings.
we'll wait to hear from you. Motion to,
Yes, well, you can approve it just 3 weeks from now. It would be a very, very brief meeting, but yes, you can approve the resolution in 3 weeks.
Maybe something else come up.
something. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. I'll second.
Everybody, all in favor, say aye.